Hey everybody, my name is Jay, and we're talking about Maxi today. You haven't watched my video titled I Got Every Character in Soul Calibur 6 to S rank, and this is how I did it yet, please do so, as I'll be going through this character in the same format that I discussed topics in that video, and I'd rather not make the same disclaimers in each video. Maxi was surprisingly a lot of fun when I played him. I expected this run to be really tough and complicated, but Maxi's fundamentals are strong enough to carry him for at least a good while. I'll admit, in order to really know how to play Maxi, you'll need to know much, much more than this guide is going to go over, and eventually you'll run into players that know how to deal with Maxi stances in a way that makes them pretty unviable. However, we don't have to get lost in the mire of disappointment that is anti-Maxi counterplay before we even start playing. There's enough to focus on with the character that it's still rewarding and strong that even players who know how to deal with Maxi will have to worry about. So let's start with block punishes. Nothing at -10. -12 you have AA, 14 you got 3K, -16 6A plus B, -18 6A plus B again. Maxi's block punishment is perfectly fine, and can be toned down to effectively 2 moves for simplicity's sake if you want at the beginning. Nothing at -10, then a pseudo-traditional AA at -12. I say it's pseudo-traditional because it does go into its stance, but you can get out of that pretty quickly with K right afterwards. You'll notice that in a lot of situations where you're forced into stance, which is kind of all the time. I'm going to try and simplify the situation into how do we get out of the stance as much as possible. -14 you've got 3K, but you could honestly just do AA again. -16 is where it changes up to 6A plus B, which is honestly pretty important. Then on -18 you could technically do 6B, but 6A plus B is perfectly fine here too. Keeping it to just AA for quick smaller punishes and 6A plus B for bigger ones is totally fine at the start. You don't have to worry about stances, you just have to worry about experimenting on what you can punish with 6A plus B as time goes on, and you get used to block punishes in general. Now, for Maxi's wall rising moves, this is where you can really start shining above the rest really quickly. I don't know how many times I've dealt with Maxis that only use wall rising B as the move they use for wall rising, and it stinks. Like, don't get me wrong, it's your -12 punish, and you'll definitely still use it, because you don't have much else, but it stinks when you're just trying to learn the character. It immediately goes into stance, and the immediate buttons on said stance are massively unsafe on block, and just overall it just puts you in a bad way. If you need to get out of stance here, like K is kind of your best way to go, because at least they're like traditionally safe. Your other wall rising moves are pretty crap. Wall rising A is even worse than wall rising B. Wall rising KK is a lot of damage, but it is relatively slow. To get something substantial out of wall rising with Maxi, try getting used to maybe 6A plus B when you duck something, or go for full crouch 3A plus B. I use full crouch 3A plus B quite a lot when I played Maxi, and I find it's a pretty underrated move against Maxi players. You press B immediately to get a guaranteed follow-up. Then wait for the stance to dissipate, to go back to neutral. Getting just that little amount of damage extra in so many like duck ties and grab scenarios is really going to help early on, so this is really worth understanding before you play even your first game. Now, when it comes to Oki, basic Oki with Maxi typically doesn't provide you a lot of ways of being sticky, but you can create some force block situations on certain knockdowns, and that can be at least moderately beneficial. On most up-close knockdowns, you're really just looking for something that hits the opponent if they roll around. 6XP plus K can hit sometimes, which is a really big commitment and is enough damage to potentially get your opponent to rethink their lying and prone ideas, but it honestly didn't hit rolls as commonly as I would have hoped when I played him. 1B is a fairly solid way of netting some damage off an opponent trying to stay grounded on a non-techable knockdowns up close. For people getting up in those types of situations instead, you can turn the Oki into a mix of 1B, 6A plus B, and grabs, which all don't require knowledge on stances and do serviceable damage. If people are teching back and hard sidestepping, you've got something like 8-8A, you've got 6A plus B hold, and you've got 6A, which also provides you a stanceless, safe way of continuing pressure. Now, when it comes to grabs, there isn't a lot to mention. He has no grabs in stance, so the pressure he gets out of using grabs comes in places where people feel more comfortable ducking or mashing. it might be a little bit harder to set up. His grabs on paper are fine. The forward grab is a technical knockdown. We'll just do like that. So in situations like that, best to go with like your 8-8A, your 6-6A, your 6-6A plus B hold idea that I talked about earlier to maintain your pressure. The back grab is much better as it's a non-technical knockdown. So you can go into the, grab or 1B or 6A plus B Oki I mentioned before. The only other thing that I'll mention is when you get your right grab, make sure to mash B to get your guaranteed follow-up. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, Maxi is hella complicated. He's the only character in the game where his stances are effectively rooted in his main kit and are unavoidable to use. However, this is a guide about playing the character as simplistically as possible so you can focus on the fundamentals. So my routes are about ease of use, quick and clean ways to get out of stance, and relying on his strongest tools outside of said stances. Eventually, this game plan can potentially fall apart. It will fall apart. But it'll at least give you the tools to find what's next for Maxi when you're dealing with tough and knowledgeable opponents. The majority of my game plan honestly centered around one thing. I love this move. It's one of my favorite lows in the game, and warrants utilizing more than you'd expect. It's great for neutral, it's great for Oki, it's great for instigating actions from the opponent so they aren't just sitting there and blocking everything that you're doing. To get more out of this, you just check how your opponent handles it. If they mash post 1B, BB, AA, B. I know for sure this isn't the optimal combo here, but it's serviceable damage, it ends in a knockdown, and is easy enough to remember when you're starting out. If you're trying to beat mash, B, B, A, A, B. You can just mash it, you don't even have to time it. If you think they'll move after 1B, then you go for AK, which puts you in the exact same position as before, so you can just go right back into the same thing. If you think they'll just take it and then stay stand blocking, you can just go for 1B into a 1B. If you think they'll backstep, you could try chasing with the K, but I could also see you just taking your 1B damage and setting back to neutral. After that, just going with something like 6A plus B to punish them ducking the 1B is a more solid way to go. 6A plus B just in general is a good move for neutral, trying to get under people's eyes, like fantastic tech route window, and it's a cheap and easy knockdown. Like, the only stance pressure I went for while playing Maxi that involves a mid was off of 4B. I'm a fan of 4BBK, since it covers itself pretty nicely, the string is fine on block, it has a cancel on the K in case people know it's a high. If I felt like I could get some level of stance mix on somebody after they blocked 4B, you got the B and the K once you let one stance transition go. You can do the same combo off the B lethal hit that I talked about with 1B, just AA, B. You just have to wait the beat when the second B would have come out, and you'll get into the stance. Other stance play, I would just get off of like longer range horizontals. The horis that I used were predominantly 8-8A and 6A. I use 6-6A as well for longer range situations. It's just that there's much less to talk about here as it doesn't involve the stances. 6A I'd like to use for those neutral situations where you get the impression someone's going to backstep on minus, like frame disadvantage. From here you get 6AAK, which puts you right back into 1B territory. This is on counter hit at the very least. You can even hold the K for better positions on block. It's important to note there's actually a big difference between 8-8A and 2-2A for this character, even though they look exactly the same. 2-2A you'd be best to avoid at the beginning as it goes into stance, but 8-8A, although it is slightly unsafe, is one of the most gigantic hitboxes ever. It gives you a fantastic counter hit for people who dared to move around when they were across the goddamn map. The counter hit combo, you would have guessed it, for BB, AA, B. Again, this is very much not the optimal combo here, but keeping my quote-unquote combo the same on virtually every counter hit I've talked about so far kind of keeps me sane when I'm learning such a complicated character. Get used to the spacings of 8-8A so you can use it better before worrying about optimal damage. After that, it's just small poking. Max's 2A is really strong. His 3K is probably the best in the whole game. Get used to smacking people for small bits of damage from farther away than you'd expect in order to pester them. The whole point of this is to get people to mash after things like 2A on hit, or even better like 3K on block, and you just move around with these moves and use your Sniper Rifle CE to whiff punish them for daring to think that they could play the game at that kind of range. That's really the start of how to play Maxi. And look, I know any Maxi players watching this video are gonna roll their eyes at my combos and my lack of stance knowledge, but please remember everyone has to start somewhere. I very much do not advise looking up all stance options and transitions and combos for Maxi when you're merely entertaining a curiosity to see if you'd like the character. That's just a great way to feel overwhelmed and quit before you start. The goal should be to find how opponents deal with what I presented to you here first, then find the answers as you go. Utilizing simple strats with Maxi first, finding where they don't work, and plugging the holes with answers you find down the line will give you greater infrastructure to work with so you don't become like the many Maxi down players you find rooting around in Twitch chats nowadays who focused on style over substance. But yeah, I hope that works out for you. Let me know how your Maxi adventure works out. Do the regular YouTube things, like and subscribe, and I'll see you for the next character, yeah? Thanks very much.